The rain hit Boston like it had a grudge. Not the soft kind that makes everything look clean and cinematic. The kind that finds the gap between your collar and your neck. The kind that never apologizes. Beyond the massive iron gates, a Gothic estate 3 centuries old rose out of the gray mist. Stone gargoyles crouched on the pillars, rainwater streaming from their open mouths. As if they were laughing inside, a great hall full of people. Perfectly still, cold, not a single breath. All of them staring at the door, and on a throne of black steel and leather, a gold fountain pen tapped a steady rhythm against the armrest. Slow, even, like a countdown. Then the pen stopped, because the door had opened, and the one walking through it was carrying something no one in that room believed could exist. The rain hit Boston like it had a grudge. Not soft rain. Not the kind that makes everything look cinematic and washed clean. The kind that finds the gap between your collar and your neck. The kind that doesn't apologize. The kind that reminds you the world has no particular interest in your plans. Clara Voss sat in the back of a town car and did not look out the window. She looked at her hands instead. Left hand. Wedding ring still on. She'd thought about taking it off 112 times in 8 months. She'd counted. Every time her fingers reached for it, something stopped her. Not love. Not anymore. Something more complicated than love. Something she still didn't have a word for. Something that lived in the same place as the 3 pharmacy receipts she'd carried in her coat pocket on the worst night of her life. Her right hand rested on her stomach. 8 months. 34 weeks. One baby boy who kicked like he already had opinions about the structural integrity of her ribcage. He kicked now hard. She breathed through it. Slow the way Dr. Webb had taught her. Breathe like you have all the time in the world. Even when you absolutely do not, Penny. Mara Aldgate leaned forward from the seat beside her. 36 years old, 5'2", the most aggressively practical woman Clara had ever met. She was holding her briefcase against her chest like a shield, which, in a way, it was. Inside that briefcase, 62 pages of legal documentation. 8 months of work. 1 signature away from finished. It's Clara, Clara said. You only correct me when you're nervous. I'm not nervous. Mara looked at Clara's hands, the knuckles on her right hand. White against the fabric of her dress. She didn't say anything. Smart woman, Clara finally looked out the window. The gates of the Voss estate appeared through the rain like something from a different century, because they were. Iron. Massive. The kind of gates that weren't built to keep people out. They were built to remind people they were small. Stone gargoyles crouched on the pillars, rain streaming from their open mouths like they were laughing. She used to find them charming. Now they just looked like what they were. You're sure about this? Mara asked. You've asked me that 3 times. You've given me the same answer 3 times. Which means you're rehearsing it. Clara turned to look at her. Her best friend, her lawyer. The woman who had driven 4 hours to a pharmacy in Connecticut at 2 in the morning when Clara needed prenatal vitamins and couldn't risk being seen. The woman who had sat on a bathroom floor with her at 3 a.m. when the panic got too big to carry alone. I need him to see me, Clara said. Not a letter, not a legal document. Me. I need to look him in the eye when he signs, and then I'm gone. For good, Mara nodded once. The town car stopped. Clara pushed the door open before the driver could move, stepped into the rain. Cold, immediate, the kind of cold that doesn't ask permission. She looked up at the estate, all of it. The Gothic spires cutting into a gray sky, the lit windows. The sheer size of the thing, this beautiful, impossible monument to 3 centuries of power. She had loved this house once deeply. She used to walk the corridors at night, trailing her fingers along the stone walls, thinking, I live here. Somehow. I actually live here. That woman felt like someone she'd read about in a book. Clara gripped the iron railing and hauled herself up the marble steps. One at a time. Her ankles were swollen. Her lower back had been a low-level catastrophe for 6 weeks. Every step required a negotiation. Beatty said, stop. Brain said, not yet. She made it to the top. The doors were already open. The entrance hall of the Voss estate smelled like aged wood and beeswax candles and something underneath both. Something older. Something the candles were there to cover. Clara had noticed it the first time she had walked through these doors 3 years ago, on the arm of a vampire king who had looked at her like she was the most remarkable thing he'd ever seen. Same smell now. Different woman, the hall was full. That was the first thing she registered. It shouldn't have been full. This was supposed to be private, efficient, clinical. 2 lawyers, 1 document, 1 signature. Instead, the entire vampire court of the eastern seaboard. They lined the walls, stood in clusters near the columns, filled the gallery above, dozens of them, all perfectly still, all watching the door, watching her. Clara didn't stop walking. 3 years of being the only warm body in a room full of apex predators had taught her one thing. The worst thing you could do was hesitate. Hesitation reads as weakness. Weakness reads as prey. So she walked, steady. One hand on her stomach, one arm at her side. She heard the whispers start before she reached the center of the room. Not whispers exactly, more like a pressure change. The way air shifts before a storm. At the far end of the hall, the throne, not the traditional one. Lucian had that removed decades ago. Replaced it with something that suited him better, black leather, brushed steel. The throne of a man who wanted everyone to understand that power doesn't need to look ornate to be absolute. He was sitting in it. Lucian Voss, 3 centuries old. 6'3". Dark hair. The kind of face that Renaissance sculptors had tried to replicate in marble and almost gotten right. Almost. Because marble couldn't hold the thing that made Lucian's face into what it was, the weight behind his eyes. The sense of a man who had watched centuries move past like weather and never once looked away. He was tapping a gold fountain pen against the armrest, rhythmic. Slow, he was staring at the doors. And standing to his right, because she was always to his right, like a shadow that had learned to dress well, was Isolde Vale, his lieutenant, his enforcer. The woman who had been the second most dangerous thing in any room containing Lucian Voss for 2 centuries. Isolde wore deep burgundy. Dark hair pulled back with architectural precision. She was watching the doorway with the expression of someone who already knows what they're about to see. And is already bored by it. Clara walked into the hall. Isolde's expression didn't change. Lucian's did. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. One moment the pen was moving. Tap, tap. Then it wasn't. Then it was falling. The gold pen hit the marble floor and the sound cracked through the silence like a fault line splitting open. Because the room had gone completely still. Every vampire in the hall, every guard, every courtier, every centuries-old predator who had watched kingdoms collapse, all of them staring at Clara's stomach. Lucian stood up, so fast the chair moved, scraped against the marble. 3 centuries of composure, and the man stood up like something had detonated in his chest. Clara kept walking. Don't stop. Don't look at him. Pick a point past his left shoulder and keep moving. She made it to 15 feet before Mara stepped up beside her, briefcase open, documents in hand. Voice somehow professional despite the fact that every predator in the room had shifted 6 inches in their direction. Mr. Voss, Mara's voice held. Barely, as agreed. We are here to finalize the dissolution of marriage between yourself and Ms. Voss. All marital assets have been declined by my client. She requests nothing from the estate. A pause. We simply need your signature on page 42. Silence. Lucian wasn't looking at Mara. He wasn't looking at the documents. He was looking at Clara. Just Clara. With an expression she couldn't read and had stopped trying to read 8 months ago, because reading Lucian Voss's face had been a full-time occupation that had broken her. Impossible. Someone breathed from the gallery. And then the whispers really started. A child. An heir, the king's blood. The words moved through the room like current. Like something electrical in the walls, Isolde didn't move. But something shifted behind her eyes. Something quick and calculated. There and gone so fast that Clara almost missed it. Almost. What trickery is this? Isolde's voice cut through the whispers. Smooth. Cold. Precise. Not a question. A verdict. What creature are you carrying, human? You disappear for 8 months and return with... What? A performance? She stepped forward. One heel click on the marble. You are out of your depth. You have always been out of your depth. Lucian moved. Not toward Clara. Toward Isolde. He crossed the space between them before anyone could track it. His hand closed around Isolde's throat. Not gently. He lifted her off the ground, turned and threw her. She hit a marble column. The sound was structural. Like something load-bearing had failed. She slid to the floor. Lucian turned back. He did not look at her again. She was furniture. Speak to my wife like that again, he said. Very quietly. The quieter Lucian spoke, Clara had learned, the more certain you could be that something was already over. And I will remove your head from your shoulders. The room went utterly silent. Clara looked at Isolde crumpled against the column, at the blood on the marble, at the absolute stillness of every vampire who had just watched their king commit casual, spectacular violence without once looking away from the woman holding the divorce papers. Clara raised one eyebrow. I am no longer your wife, she said, which means Mara is right. It's Ms. Voss, or just Clara. Whichever helps you remember that this, she gestured at the room, all of it, is a formality. Not a reunion. Lucien crossed the room, 50 feet, gone in an instant. Suddenly he was directly in front of her, close, too close. She had spent 8 months trying to forget how tall he was. 8 months of deliberate forgetting. And her body remembered everything the moment he was within arm's reach. The cold that came off him. The smell. Old stone and rain and something with no name because it was simply the smell of centuries. A baby, he said. 2 words. Like they'd knocked every other word out of his head. He raised one hand toward her stomach, trembling, Lucien Voss, trembling. She had watched this man walk into a room full of armed werewolf delegates without changing his expression. She had seen him negotiate with the oldest vampires on the continent, and never once show anything they could use against him. His hand was shaking. Clara slapped it away, the sound echoed. Sharp, clean. Every guard in the room tensed. 12 of them, hands moving toward weapons, bodies leaning forward. 1 word from Lucien and she would have been. Lucien raised 1 finger, stand down. She watched them settle back. I am carrying my child, Clara said. Each word its own sentence, its own wall. A child you will never know. A child who will grow up far from all of this. She held his gaze. Didn't flinch. Mara. Page 42. Mara stepped forward. Pen extended. Lucien looked at the documents, then at Clara. Why did you run? Just that. Raw. No performance hats. The voice of a man who had spent 8 months with a question and nowhere to put it. Why didn't you tell me? Sign the papers, Lucien. You are carrying the heir to the Voss bloodline. He caught himself on the name. Old reflex. A child between us is biologically. We believed it was impossible. You are carrying a miracle. And you hid. Because you were busy, Clara said, steadier than she'd practiced. 8 months of rehearsing this conversation at 4 a.m., while a baby used her ribs as a percussion instrument, and her voice came out steady. You were busy, she said again, that night. The winter solstice. You were occupied. Something crossed his face. Fast. Gone, Penello. He stopped. Corrected himself. Clara, I came to your study that night to tell you something. She held his gaze. This part she hadn't planned to say. This part she'd kept in the same locked place as everything else she couldn't carry. I wasn't checking in. I was terrified. I needed you. And when I opened that door, I found Isolde, her fangs in your neck. The 2 of you. She stopped. I didn't stay for the explanation, because you didn't think there was one, because there couldn't be one. That ritual, you told me yourself in the first month of our marriage, that blood sharing of that kind was something you'd given up. That it was a form of, she found the word, intimacy. Your word, Clara. Sign the papers. He looked at the documents in Mara's outstretched hand. She watched something move through him. Some calculation being made behind his eyes that she could see but not access. That had always been the thing about Lucien. The machinery was visible. The output wasn't. He took the documents. Mara exhaled very quietly. Clara let herself breathe. And then Lucien took 62 pages of 8 months of work, gripped them with both hands, and tore them in half, then in half again, then again. The pieces fell like snow, drifting, silent, settling across the polished marble in a pattern that looked almost deliberate. Clara stared at them. What? She said, flat. Not a question. Her brain had run out of syntax. Guards. Lucien's voice shifted. Something large and terrible moved into it. Seal the estate. Lock the perimeter. No one enters. No one leaves. The heavy oak doors slammed shut. The sound was a wall closing. The locks engaged. Heavy. Sequential. Ancient mechanisms clicking into place one after another, like the bolting of something permanent. Mara made a sound that was almost not a scream. Clara looked at the destroyed documents on the floor. 8 months. 62 pages. Gone? You cannot do this, she said. I know, then why? Because I am doing it anyway. He looked at her. All of her. The black maternity dress Mara had helped her find in Connecticut. The dark hair damp from the rain, the hand still resting on her stomach. The way she was standing, spine straight, chin up. The way she always stood when she was scared but refusing to perform it. You are my wife. You are the queen of this court. You are carrying my son. And I will be damned. He said it like a man who knew exactly what damnation was, who had met it personally. Before I let you walk out of my sight again. Clara looked at the doors, at the guards, at Mara, who had gone the color of old paper and was clutching her empty briefcase like it might open into a different dimension. Then at Lucien. This is kidnapping, she said. Yes, I am 8 months pregnant, I know. If anything happens to me or this baby, nothing will happen to you. Something fierce moved into his voice. Nothing will ever happen to you again. I swear it on every year I have been alive. Clara opened her mouth. Closed it. You tore up a legal document. That doesn't make it not real. I already signed my copy. The dissolution still stands on my side. You can't, Clara, legally undo. Clara, he said her name like it was the only word left. Like he'd been saying it in empty rooms for 8 months and finally had somewhere to put it. I was poisoned that night. She stopped. The room stopped. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Just 1 second, then kept going. Winter solstice, he said. The diplomatic reception with the Northern Wolf delegation. Someone put Wolf's Bane in the blood wine. He watched her face. Steady. Just the words, one at a time. It's lethal to us. It moves through the system in minutes. If it reaches the heart, a pause. Isolde tasted it in my blood. She began siphoning it out. That's what you saw. Not a bond. Not intimacy. She was draining poison from my veins while Kane went for the antidote. Clara said nothing. I was unconscious for 3 days, he said. I woke up and you were gone. Still nothing. The next 4 hours I spent convinced the wolves had taken you. That what they'd used on me was a distraction. I tore the estate apart. Then the city. Then I expanded outward, a breath. Not exhaustion. Memory. I've been looking for you for 8 months. Every resource this court has. Every contact. Every favor owed to the Voss name across 3 centuries. He looked at her. You vanished completely. I had help, she said. Quietly. Witch enchantments. Yes. I eventually figured that out. Something moved across his face. Almost wry. Whoever sold them to you was good. Silence. Clara was doing the math. She could feel it happening. The date. The night. The way Isolde had looked in that room. Not guilty, not caught. Desperate. Urgent. One hand pressed to Lucien's chest while the other. She had been keeping him alive. Clara had watched a woman save her husband's life and walked away. She looked down at her stomach. At the baby who was completely unaware of the crisis around him and had, apparently, decided this was a good time for synchronized swimming. She pressed her hand flat against her dress. 8 months ago, she'd walked toward that study door with 3 positive pregnancy tests in her coat pocket, shaking, not from fear, from the sheer, almost absurd impossibility of it, a human and a vampire. The medical literature, scattered across obscure supernatural journals she'd spent weeks tracking down, said it shouldn't be possible. Not conception, not development, nothing. And yet, 3 tests. 3 unmistakable lines. She'd needed Lucien, specifically, urgently. The way you need the one person in the world who understands what you're trying to say before you can say it. She'd opened the door, seen what she'd seen. Built a wall around that moment so fast and so solid that she'd survived 8 months behind it without examining what was on the other side. What if she'd been wrong? What if she'd been completely catastrophically wrong? Clara, Mara's voice. Small, careful. Can we go somewhere that isn't? She glanced at the assembled vampire court, all of whom were watching with the attention of people witnessing something historically significant. Somewhere else. Lucien turned to her before Clara could speak. Miss Aldgate, precise, measured. I am genuinely grateful for your loyalty to my wife. It is not something I will forget. However, a pause. You will still be staying, as a guest. The East Wing has been prepared. Mara stared at him. You're keeping her lawyer hostage. I prefer guest. Those words mean very different things. The Wi-Fi password is Voss Estate 2024. Your firm will be told negotiations are ongoing. My firm has a protocol, Miss Aldgate, just her name. With the weight of 3 centuries behind it, 2 guards materialized from the edges of the room, almost politely. They stood on either side of Mara with the practiced courtesy of people who do this regularly. Mara, Clara said quickly. Penny, Clara. Mara looked between the guards and the destroyed documents and arrived at the only rational conclusion available. I am going to need a very thorough debrief. I'll come find you, Clara said. I promise. Mara walked out with her head up and her briefcase clutched to her chest and her jaw set at the angle of a woman storing 47 legal grievances for later deployment. The door closed. Clara and Lucien were alone. Or as alone as 2 people could be, with 40 vampires who had collectively become extremely interested in the ceiling. I want the full account, Clara said. Not your version. Evidence, medical records, your physician's testimony, your head of security. Everything, you'll have it, and I want Mara comfortable. She will be, and I want. Her voice shifted. Just slightly. A crack in the structure. I need to sit down. She said it the way you say things you've been not saying for too long. Lucien moved before she finished the sentence. His hands at her elbow, the small of her back. Not gripping. Supporting, I can walk, she said. I know, Lucien. I know you can, he said again. Quiet her. But you've been on your feet for 2 hours, and your heart rate has been elevated since you walked through those doors, and the baby has been in the same position too long. He held her gaze. Let me help you to a chair. Just that. She looked at him. This impossible, infuriating man who had spent 8 months dismantling the eastern seaboard looking for her. Who still didn't know she'd walked toward his study with 3 pregnancy tests in her pocket and love in her chest, and turned around without saying a word. She let him guide her to a chair. Just that. The baby kicked again. Harder, a rolling movement visible through the fabric of her dress. Lucian felt it. His hand was at the back of her chair, close to her shoulder, and when the kick came through, he stopped. Everything in him stopped. 3 centuries of practiced composure and controlled expression, gone, just gone. What was left underneath looked almost exactly like grief. Except it wasn't grief, it was the other thing, the thing on the other side of grief. The thing grief becomes when something comes back. He looked at Clara. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything. Outside, the rain kept going. The gargoyles kept laughing, and somewhere in the East Wing, Mara Aldgate was already composing the most detailed habeas corpus petition in supernatural legal history. But in this room, in this chair, in this exact moment, the world was about to get considerably more complicated. Because Lucian Voss had just realized. In the specific irreversible way, you realized things that rearrange everything, that he had not only lost his wife, he had nearly lost his son. And he did not yet know the half of it. 3 hours later, the East Wing was quiet. Mara had been installed in a guest suite that was, by any objective measure, nicer than anywhere she had ever stayed in her life. She noted this fact with the resentment of someone being bribed with excellent thread count. She accepted the Wi-Fi password, contacted her firm, used the words negotiations ongoing with the brittle professionalism of a woman eating glass, then sat on the edge of a 400-year-old bed and sent Clara a text. Tell me you have a plan. Clara did not have a plan. She was sitting in the master suite, her old room, unchanged, every item exactly where she'd left it, which told her something about 8 months she didn't have the energy to process, with her shoes off and a cup of tea she hadn't ordered. And she was thinking not about the documents. Those were confetti on the great hall floor, not about Lucian. He was in the corridor. She could sense the stillness of someone exercising enormous restraint on the other side of a door. She was thinking about Isolde Vale, second in command of the Voss court for over a century. She'd met Isolde on her 3rd day in the estate, before she understood the full architecture of the place. Isolde had looked at her with a smile that was technically correct in every detail and wrong in every way that mattered. Isolde had never liked her. Fine. Clara had known that, had worked around it, had built a life in this estate around 100 small negotiations like that one, but Wolf's bane in the blood wine. That wasn't dislike. That wasn't territorial behavior or political maneuvering. That was something else entirely. Clara pressed her hand flat on her stomach and thought about what it would mean if the poison hadn't come from the Wolf delegation. If it had come from inside the estate. From someone who knew Lucian's routines, his preferences, the exact blend of wine at formal receptions. Someone who knew how long it would take the poison to reach his heart, and who would know that one specific person, with the access and the biological ability, would be positioned to stop it. Who stood to gain if Lucian died? Chaos. Succession war. The court fractures into pieces, but if Lucian nearly died, and the right person saved him, at the right moment, with the right witness, Clara sat very still. Outside the door, Lucian shifted, the sound of him exhaling, slow. Controlled, you can come in, she said. He opened the door, he'd removed the jacket, rolled his sleeves. Which meant he'd been in his office at some point, working. Because that was what Lucian did when he didn't know what to do with himself. He managed. He responded to the 17 urgent messages that had accumulated, while he stood in a great hall watching the impossible walk through his doors. He stopped just inside the doorway. Sit, she said. Please, he sat. Across from her, at the exact distance that said, I am here, I am not pushing. Tell me about Kane, she said. A pause. My head of security. Has he been with you since the solstice? Yes. He went for the antidote that night. He found it in time, and since then. Has he been running the security investigation? Silence. The kind that means something is being rearranged, we assumed, Lucian said slowly, based on the timing. The reception. The delegation, who poured the wine that night. He looked at her. Lucian. Who poured the wine, a long pause. Estate staff, he said finally, under Isolde's supervision. She handled all formal event coordination. Clara nodded once. Said nothing. She watched it happen in his face. That specific thing he did when rebuilding his understanding of a situation from the foundation up. She'd seen it twice before. Both times, what followed was terrible and precise. "I need Kane," he said, not to her, to the room. Already somewhere else in his head. "I know," she said. He stood, looked at her. "You work this out in 3 hours?" "In that chair. I've had 8 months to think about what I saw that night." About what didn't fit. About what she had to gain. Clara met his eyes. "I just didn't have the piece about the poison until tonight." Something layered moved through his expression. "Sleep?" he said. "I'm not, Clara." Her name like the beginning of a longer sentence he decided to cut short. "There are 2 guards outside this door. You are safe. Mara is 3 corridors away, building what I assume is a formidable legal argument." A pause. "Sleep." "I'll have Kane pull the records tonight." She looked at him, this man, who had just had his entire reconstruction of the worst night of his life cracked open by his estranged, pregnant wife in the span of one conversation. "If Kane finds what I think he'll find," she said, "this becomes considerably more complicated than a divorce. I know, this doesn't mean I've decided anything. About staying. I know that too. I just want to be clear." "You've always been clear," he said. "It's one of the things He stopped. "Sleep, Clara." He walked to the door, stopped. Hand on the frame. "For what it's worth," he said, not looking at her. "I looked for you every day. Not because you belonged to me. Not because of the title, or the court, or the air, a breath. Because there has not been a room I've walked into in the last 8 months that didn't feel like something was missing from it." He left. The door didn't close all the way. Clara sat in the chair for a long moment. "Your father," she said quietly to her stomach, "is a very complicated man." The baby offered his opinion via her left rib. She leaned her head back and didn't sleep for a very long time. And in the corridor, Lucien Voss stood outside the almost closed door and didn't move. He listened to the sound of his wife's breathing in a room that had been empty for 8 months, and thought about wine glasses and poison and a woman who had been standing next to him for a century, smiling the smile that was correct in every technical detail, and got very, very still. Day 1, Clara woke up in the bed that used to be hers and stared at the ceiling for 11 minutes before admitting she wasn't going back to sleep. The ceiling was the same. Every carved detail, every shadow. She'd memorized this ceiling in the first months of her marriage, lying awake when the estate was its quietest. Only the distant movement of guards and the occasional creak of an old building settling into itself. She used to find it comforting. Now it just felt like weight. She sat up. The baby shifted with her, slow, rolling, like he was adjusting in a chair he'd decided was adequate. "Morning," she said. He pushed one foot into her ribs. The room was warmer than she expected. Someone had stoked the fireplace during the night. On the table, a tray, fresh fruit, warm bread, a pot of tea still hot, which meant someone had been in recently. Silently, without waking her, old vampire estate habits. The staff moved like shadows. She ate. Because Dr. Webb had been very clear about eating, which brought her to the part of the morning she'd been avoiding. Dr. Webb, Dr. Harlan Webb. Head of maternal fetal medicine at St. Mercy Hospital in New York. 61 years old. 3 research fellowships. 2 published books. The man who had, over the course of 8 months, gone from being profoundly skeptical of her blood work to being the single most important person in her and her son's continued survival. He did not know she was here. He had a 9 a.m. appointment with another patient today. She knew his schedule. She'd been his patient under a false name for 7 months. She had not, in the chaos of last night's divorce, thought about what happened to Dr. Webb. The door opened, not Lucien. Kane. Lucien's head of security looked like someone had given a mountain a fitted black jacket. 6'5". The particular quality of very large, very competent men of moving through space without disturbing it. He set a folder on the end of the bed, said nothing. Clara looked at the folder. Then at him. "He found something," she said. "He found everything," Kane said. Then left. It took her 40 minutes to read the folder. 40 minutes sitting cross-legged on the bed with the tray pushed aside and the file open across her knees and the fire burning down in the grate. She read it twice. Because the first time, her brain did what brains do with information that restructures everything. It skipped, moved too fast, tried to run ahead to somewhere that made sense. The second time, she made herself slow down. The wolf's bane had not come from the wolf delegation. Kane's investigation, painstaking, months-long, documented across 40 pages, had traced the compound back to a supplier in Quebec who dealt exclusively with vampire quartz. Not wolf packs, vampires. The compound had been customized, modified for maximum absorption when introduced to blood wine at a specific temperature, the temperature of the wine served at Voss Estate formal receptions. The purchase, made through a shell account. The shell account connected through 3 layers of deliberate obfuscation that had taken Kane's team 6 months to unpeel, to a financial instrument inside the estate's operational budget, under Isolde Vale's administrative purview, for 3 years. 3 years. Clara had arrived at this estate 3 years ago, and Isolde had been building this for 3 years. There was more medical records from the night of the solstice. Kane had obtained them from an estate physician. Not the one Isolde had preferred, a different one who apparently owed Kane a favor of unspecified nature. The records showed the progression of Wolf's Bane through Lucian's system, the rate of spread, the mechanism by which Isolde's intervention had slowed it. And at the bottom of the attending physician's notes, a line almost casual in its brevity. Lelt Vale was present at the reception before the diplomatic guests arrived, approximately 40 minutes. She oversaw final table arrangements, 40 minutes, the wine had been poured. Clara closed the folder. She sat very still. 3 years ago, she had walked into this estate as the wife of the king, and Isolde had smiled at her with a smile that was technically correct in every detail. And for 3 years, behind that smile, this woman had been building something. Patient, precise. The kind of plan that only works if you're willing to wait. If you understand that the right moment, positioned correctly, is worth more than any amount of direct force. Get Clara out. Get Clara gone. Keep the king alive. Because a dead king means war, means chaos, means no one controls anything, but make sure he owes you his life. Make sure he's watched you save him. Make sure the human wife has already left. Already the woman who abandoned him in his worst moment. And then, Clara pressed both hands flat on her stomach. Breathing, then she got up, got dressed, and went to find Lucian. He was in the war room, what Clara had always privately called the room on the 2nd floor. All maps and screens and communication equipment that looked completely wrong against stone walls and vaulted ceilings, like someone had installed a NASA control center inside a medieval cathedral. Lucian was at the central table. Kane across from him, 3 others, all looking at documents that matched the ones in the folder. She walked in without knocking. Old habit, back before she'd consciously decided to let it return. Every head came up. Lucian looked at her, then at the folder, then at her face. He dismissed the room with one gesture. They left at the exit velocity of people who understand they are not the primary consideration. Kane went last, a glance at Clara. Something between an apology and a warning. Then they were alone. 3 years, Clara said. Yes. She started this before I arrived. We believe so. She built it around me. Clara set the folder on the table. The whole thing only works if someone witnesses the solstice, someone whose departure would be plausible. Someone who would see what happened and not wait for an explanation. She looked at him. She knew how I'd react. She'd been watching you for 2 years. She knew I wouldn't fight. I'd just go. Lucian said nothing. Because that's what I do, Clara said. Not bitterly, just accurately. The precision of a woman who has had 8 months to develop an honest self-assessment. I don't make scenes. I don't demand explanations in front of audiences. I pack quietly and leave and rebuild somewhere else. A pause. She counted on that. She miscalculated one thing, Lucian said. What? She didn't account for the baby. The room was quiet. Clara sat. The baby was doing something that felt like hiccups. Small, rhythmic, indifferent to the geopolitical crisis occurring around him. Tell me something, she said. In 8 months of looking for me, did you ever think I'd left on purpose? Lucian was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that means the answer is complicated and he's deciding how honest to be. For the first 72 hours, he said. Yes, she'd expected that. Because it wasn't impossible, he said. You'd been unhappy. I knew you'd been unhappy. The court, the way certain members treated you, I addressed it repeatedly but not adequately. A pause. So yes. For 72 hours I considered the possibility that you'd made a choice, and then I found your coat, he said. The gray one. In the corridor outside my study. You'd dropped it when you left. And when I picked it up, he stopped. Clara felt something move through her chest. The coat I was wearing that night, she said. Quietly, there were 3 pharmacy receipts in the pocket, he said. From 3 different locations. All purchased the same day. His jaw worked, and they all matched. She looked at her hands. I found them at 11 p.m. on the third day, he said. I had Kane mobilize every available resource before midnight. The room was very quiet. I was going to tell you that night, Clara said. To the table. To the folder and its 40 pages of a plan designed to destroy everything. That's why I came to your study. I'd taken 3 tests because I didn't trust one. I needed a third before it was real enough to say out loud. She looked up. I was terrified. I didn't know what a pregnancy meant for me physically. The literature I'd found was thin, contradictory. Most of those histories didn't end well for the human mother. Something profound and awful moved through his face. So I came to find you, she said. Because there was no one else in this entire world. There was no one else I would have gone to with that. The silence after that had weight. The specific weight of something irreversible being acknowledged. I failed you, Lucian said. Simple, no performance. Not the night of the solstice. Before that, I built a court that made you feel like you had no allies in it. I allowed behaviors I should have stopped years earlier. I was so focused on managing the political dimensions of our marriage that I did not. He stopped. Started again. I did not make it sufficiently clear that you were not a diplomatic consideration. You were my wife, Lucian. I know, I'm just being accurate, he said. Clara looked at him for a long moment. This man. Sitting across a table covered in evidence of a plan designed to take everything from him. And what he was focused on was the woman across from him and whether he had been, by any measure, adequate. We need to deal with Isolde, she said. She's confined to her quarters. 4 guards, will she talk? Not voluntarily. Then you need more than what's in that folder before you can move formally against her. Because if you act and she has allies on the High Council, she does. Then it needs to be airtight. Yes, Clara nodded, stewed. Pressed one hand to her lower back. Get what you need, she said. And I want Mara briefed, fully. She knows supernatural law better than anyone outside a vampire court, Lucian blinked. Which, for Lucian, was the equivalent of visible surprise. Your lawyer, he said. My lawyer. Currently in the East Wing composing what I assume is a very creative brief, and would be significantly more useful if she knew what was actually happening. She's human, so am I. Clara met his eyes. That's been working out fine so far. Something moved in his expression. Almost a smile. In different circumstances, as with more sleep, it would have made it. I'll have Kane brief her, he said. Good. Clara started toward the door, stopped. One more thing? Yes, Dr. Webb. A pause. Dr. Harlan Webb. Head of maternal fetal medicine at St. Mercy Hospital in New York. He's been monitoring this pregnancy for 7 months. He knows my blood work. He knows the baby's growth patterns. He knows every variable that makes this pregnancy different from a standard human pregnancy. She turned. He needs to be here. Lucian's expression went careful. I'll send, before you send anyone. Clara held his gaze. Dr. Webb is a good man, brilliant and decent. He spent 7 months treating a patient whose chart made no biological sense without once breaking her trust or asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. A pause. He is not to be frightened. He is not to be threatened. He is not to be given the impression that he has no choice. Silence. If he comes here, she said, it has to be because he chooses to. Because someone explains the situation honestly and he decides his patient's welfare requires it. Clara, Lucian said. I mean it, I understand. Do you? I will send Kane, he said. Kane is good at explaining situations, and if Dr. Webb says no? A long pause. The kind where words cost something. Then we find another way, he said. Clara studied his face. I'll believe that when I see it, she said, and walked out. She believed it less 3 hours later when Kane knocked on her door and said, with the expressionlessness of a man whose face was doing extraordinary work, that Dr. Webb had been successfully contacted and was currently en route via helicopter. Kane added, which he boarded voluntarily, Clara said. Not a question. He was given a thorough briefing, Kane said, and then he was given the option to board the helicopter. Or not board the helicopter, and how long did he have to decide? A pause. Sufficient time, Kane said. Kane, he has excellent accommodations. His entire team is with him. Every piece of equipment he requested has either been transferred or is being transported by a second vehicle. Kane's expression remained entirely neutral. The king also indicated he would be compensated at any rate Dr. Webb felt was appropriate. And the hospital? The king has made a significant philanthropic contribution to St. Mercy's research endowment. Clara stared at him. He bought the hospital's cooperation, she said. He made a donation, Kane said. Very carefully. How large? An even longer pause. Sufficient, Kane said. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. He told me he wasn't going to. The doctor is safe, Kane said, quickly but gently. He is not unhappy. He is somewhat overwhelmed by the helicopter and the general situation, but he is safe and professional and has already reviewed the file we sent ahead. A brief pause. He said, and I am quoting directly, "Tell whoever is responsible for this patient's care for the last month that they should be embarrassed." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Embarrassment. Because she'd gone a month without her doctor. Because she'd been running. Because she'd let 8 months of accumulated stress come to a head in a rainstorm outside a vampire estate. "When does he land?" she asked. 40 minutes. The West Wing has been converted to a medical facility. Mr. Voss was very specific about the specifications. Of course he was. There is also, Kane said, in the careful tone of someone saving something for last, a complete maternity ward. Clara looked up. "He had it built overnight," Kane said. "While you were sleeping?" She didn't say anything. "The equipment was sourced from 4 different suppliers," Kane continued, in the tone of a man who has learned that sometimes the most direct route to a woman's cooperation is through her prenatal care specifications. "The incubators are the latest model. The surgical suite, Kane." "Yes. Thank you," he nodded once. Left. Clara sat in the room that used to be hers and looked at the fire. And thought about a man who had spent the night converting a wing of his 300-year-old estate into a hospital, because she'd said she needed her doctor, who had purchased a hospital's cooperation rather than simply issuing a command because she'd said the doctor needed to feel like he had a choice. Not perfect, not even close, but trying. Dr. Harlan Webb arrived at 4:17 p.m. He came through the door like a man who had been told a completely impossible story on a helicopter and was now processing the destination of that story in real time. 61 years old. Silver hair. Tie askew, white coat billowing. He'd apparently insisted on the white coat. Behind him, 2 nurses, a technician, and what appeared to be a substantial amount of portable medical equipment, being carried by 4 vampire guards who looked personally offended by weight limits. Dr. Webb looked at the guards. At the Gothic architecture. At the actual torches in the wall sconces. Then at Clara. "Ms. Voss," he said. Then almost immediately, "Or I suppose it's actually Ms. Voss after all." "It's complicated," she said. I gathered, already moving toward her. Doctor mode. The mode where everything else. Helicopter flights, vampire guards, the fact that his patient had been living inside a supernatural power structure for 3 years, became background data to be processed after vitals. "How long have you been here?" "Since last night, and before that." "When did you last sleep?" "The night before." "In Boston, and before that?" She didn't answer. He made a sound. The sound of a man who has been having this exact conversation for 7 months and is tired of being right. "The stress indicators in your last blood panel were already elevated," he said, guiding her toward a chair with the authority of someone who stopped asking and simply does. "That was 10 days ago." "Whatever has happened in the last 24 hours, he glanced at Kane in the doorway, and I am using whatever as a broad and deliberately vague term. "Probably wise," Kane said. "Will not have helped." He looked at Clara directly. "I need to examine you." "Fully the West Wing," Kane offered. "We've prepared." "I saw it coming in," Dr. Webb said, without looking at him. "It's adequate." A pause. "More than adequate. Though I have questions about the procurement timeline for some of that equipment. The King." Kane began. "I have read the King's notes," Dr. Webb said, in the tone of a man who has done exactly that and has substantial feelings about it. He sent a 40-page medical brief to the helicopter, prior to landing. With questions annotated in the margins, he paused. In 3 different colors. Silence. He color-coded his concerns, Dr. Webb said. Red for immediate. Yellow for near-term. Blue for what he described as general monitoring considerations. Clara felt something strange happen to her face. Not quite a smile. The thing that comes before a smile when you're not quite ready. "That sounds about right," she said. "It was," Dr. Webb said. "The most thorough patient advocate brief I have received in 30 years of medicine." Another pause. "I still have questions about the helicopter. I believe the word being used is donation," Clara said. "To the research endowment." "Yes, how much?" Clara looked at Kane. Kane looked at the ceiling. "Sufficient," they said. Simultaneously. Dr. Webb studied them both. "Let's get you examined," he said. And that was that. The examination took 2 hours. At the end, Dr. Webb sat across from Clara in the converted examination room and looked at his notes for a long moment. "The baby is in good shape," he said. "Given everything. His growth is ahead of schedule." which is consistent with the hybrid biology we've been tracking. His lung development is further along than I'd expect at 34 weeks, which, and I say this as a man who deals in measurable facts, appears to be a function of whatever his father contributed to the equation. Strong, Clara said. Aggressively so, he set down his pen. You, however, I know, the stress markers. I know, Clara, her name, the way he said it when he was moving from physician to something closer to human. You are 34 weeks pregnant with a child whose physical demands on your body are approximately double those of a standard pregnancy. Your iron is low, your blood pressure is higher than it should be. You have not slept adequately in weeks. He held her gaze. You are strong. 7 months of this largely alone, and I have genuine admiration for that. But there is a difference between strong and invincible. She nodded. He studied her for another moment. Is this place safe? He asked. Quietly. Just the question. She thought about it. Really thought. It's complicated, she said. Most things worth having are, he picked up his pen. Blood work twice daily. Off your feet as much as possible. Eating on a schedule. I'll give you a list. And I want someone with actual medical authority checking your blood pressure every 4 hours. There are nurses. I mean someone who will argue with you if the readings are concerning. He looked at her over his glasses. Your guards appear to agree with everything you say. They don't agree with Lucian. Then Mr. Voss and I are going to have a conversation. Clara blinked. He left 17 annotated questions in that brief. Dr. Webb said, red category, immediate. I'm going to answer them, all of them. In person, he's not easy to talk to. I've dealt with difficult family members before. He's 3 centuries old. I've dealt with 90-year-olds who think they know more than I do. Dr. Webb stood, straightened his tie. They don't. And neither does he. He looked at her one more time. Something in it that was almost fond. Rest, Clara. I mean it. He left. Clara sat alone in the examination room, right. She was in a vampire estate with her estranged husband, her guest lawyer, her medically procured physician, and an unborn child who had strong opinions about everything. Isolde Vale was 2 floors above her, confined to her quarters, nursing a shattered shoulder and a plan that had been partially exposed. And something was wrong. She could feel it. Not specifically. Not with evidence she could point to. More like the specific prickle at the back of her neck she'd developed over 3 years of living somewhere. The normal rules of human threat assessment didn't apply. The estate was too quiet. Not the quiet of a place at rest. The quiet of a place holding its breath. She stood. Walked to the door, opened it. The guard outside. Voss Court, 3rd year. She remembered his face if not his name. Turned immediately. Is Kane nearby? She asked. With Mr. Voss, ma'am. 2nd floor. And Isolde's guards. Are they? Still posted, he said. Then more carefully. Last check was 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. Something cold moved through her. Can you reach them? She said. Right now. Directly, he touched his earpiece. A pause. Longer than it should have been. Faro, a beat. Faro, respond, nothing. Holt, come in, nothing. Clara was already moving. Get Kane, she said. Now. Don't wait. She was already walking. Back towards the staircase. Because she knew. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew the way you know things your body registers before your brain catches up. Isolde wasn't in her room. The fire in Clara's fireplace was the wrong color. She'd left it burning amber. Good seasoned oak. Normal. Now it was blue at the edges, sickly. Like something chemical had been introduced to the air. Clara stopped in the doorway. Isolde was standing by the window. Not the woman from last night. Disheveled, thrown, arm in a sling. This Isolde had rebuilt herself. Black clothing. Hair repinned with architectural precision. The broken shoulder still visible in how she held that arm, but the pain suppressed to a detail. A footnote, her other hand held a syringe, narrow. Glass. The fluid inside glowed the specific green of something designed in a laboratory to cause maximum damage in minimum time. Hello, Isolde said. Pleasant. Like they'd run into each other in a corridor. Clara did not run. Did not scream. She took 1 step backward. How did you get past the guards? She said. I've been running this court security rotations for 80 years, Isolde said. Every protocol in this building went through my office at some point. Every gap. Every blind spot. She tilted her head. Did you really think 4 men with earpieces were sufficient? They seemed sufficient yesterday. Yesterday Lucian wasn't distracted. Her eyes dropped to Clara's stomach, not warmly. The way you look at a problem you've been trying to solve. You've distracted him considerably. I've been told that's one of my better qualities. Isolde's mouth moved. The shape of a smile without any of its components. Do you know what this is? She held up the syringe. I can guess. It's very targeted. It won't hurt you, not meaningfully. You'll be uncomfortable for a few hours and then you'll be fine. The syringe turned slowly in her fingers. The baby, however, Clara's hand moved to her stomach. Don't give her the reaction. Don't let her, too late. Isolde had already seen it. He loves you, Isolde said, conversationally. The weather. Genuinely. I've watched Lucien Voss for over a century and I have never seen him look at anything the way he looks at you. It's, a pause. Inconvenient, Isolde, if you'd just stayed gone. And for a moment, just a moment, something real moved under the surface of her voice. Something that wasn't calculation. Something older and rawer than strategy. If you'd just done what I designed for you to do. You were supposed to build a life somewhere. Be sad for a while. Move on. He would have mourned you appropriately and then, the realness sealed over. Back to glass. But you came back to sign the divorce papers, Clara said. I wasn't coming back. And yet here you are, here I am. With his child, the syringe stilled. Which changes everything. Which makes you permanent. Which means I spent 3 years building something and you've undone it simply by. She stopped. It's almost funny. It really isn't, Clara said. She was calculating. Distance to the door, 12 feet. Distance to Isolde, 9. Speed differential, not in her favor. She was 34 weeks pregnant, and Isolde was 2 centuries old with a vampire's reflexes. With one working arm. I know what you did, Clara said, to keep her talking. But also because it was true. The wolf's bane, the shell account. The supplier in Quebec. Kane found all of it. Something shifted in Isolde's face. He's thorough, she said. He is. It won't matter, Isolde said. The High Council has members who've worked with me for decades. If Lucien moves against me based on Kane's investigation, I have enough leverage. You had enough leverage, Clara said. Before tonight. Before Lucien knew, she met her eyes. You're not negotiating from strength right now? You know that? A pause. No, Isolde said quietly. I'm not. She looked at the syringe, which is why this needs to happen now. While I still can, she moved. Vampire speed. Incomprehensible. Clara had known it was coming and still couldn't track it. Cold hand. Iron grip. On her wrist, Clara didn't fight the grip. She'd thought about this. You cannot outspeed a vampire. But a broken shoulder is a broken shoulder regardless of what you are. She dropped her weight. All of it. Every pound. Straight down, the sudden shift yanked Isolde forward. Off balance. Just enough. Clara twisted toward the bad shoulder and drove her elbow back. The sound Isolde made was not human. The grip broke. Clara stumbled. Hit the edge of the bed. Caught herself. One hand on the mattress. One hand on her stomach. Breathing. Hard. Isolde recovered faster than should have been possible. 3 feet away. Syringe still in hand. Something had changed in her face. The calculation was still there, but something had joined it. Rage, the real kind. The kind that means nothing is being weighed anymore. Stay still, Isolde said, and her voice had dropped into something that wasn't a voice. Something from further down. No, Clara said, the dagger. Lucien had left one under the pillow. She'd noticed it last night and left it exactly where it was because she was Clara and she noticed things and she kept them where they were. 12 inches the pillow. Was 12 inches away. She dove for it. Her hand closed around the hilt. She spun. Silver blade. Catching the wrong blue light of the fire. That won't stop me, Isolde said. No, Clara said. But it'll slow you down enough. And then the door not opened, gun, one moment solid oak. One moment a cloud of splinters and force that sent both of them staggering. Lucien came through the space where the door had been. Clara had seen Lucien angry. She'd seen him cold. She'd seen him in the register of controlled fury that was somehow more frightening than any performance of rage. She had never seen this. This was not controlled. This was what lived underneath the control. The thing 3 centuries of discipline had been built to contain. He crossed the room before she could track it. His hand closed around Isolde's throat. He carried her to the wall, the stone wall. The load-bearing wall that had been standing since the estate was built. The impact was architectural. The syringe fell. Hit the floor. The glass didn't break, just rolled. Isolde's hands came up, clawing at his wrist. No purchase. None at all. You were in my house, Lucien said. Very quietly. For over a century, she made a sound. You were in my house, he said again. Like the words themselves were the full scope of the crime. I trusted you with, he looked at Clara, and something happened in his face that she had never seen there before. Not rage, not grief. Both, and underneath both of them, something simpler and more fundamental, fear 3 century old, bone-deep fear for her, for the baby Lucien, Clara said. He looked at Isolde. Your treason ends tonight, he said. Quick, clean, final. The sound it made was very small. Isolde went still. He let go. She fell. He was across the room before the sound finished, and his hands were on Clara's face, her shoulders, her arms, checking, his eyes moving over her with the desperate, focused intensity of a man taking inventory of everything he nearly lost. Are you hurt? He said. No, the baby. He's fine. And because apparently her son had inherited his father's sense of timing, the baby kicked. Hard, against Lucian's hand, which was now on her stomach. See, Lucian's hands were shaking, visibly. Not slightly, 3 centuries. And his hands were shaking. I heard her voice through the monitor, he said. We had audio on your room. I should have told you, I'm sorry, that conversation can happen later. But I heard her and I. You're here, Clara said. I should have been faster. You're here, he looked at her. With the full force of everything he was. I'm here, he said. And then Clara felt it, not relief, not the aftermath of adrenaline. Something different. Sharp and low and wrong in a way she recognized from every book she'd read, every protocol Dr. Webb had walked her through, every 3 a.m. conversation when she'd been alone and terrified, and had memorized all the warning signs. Lucian, she said. Her voice was different. He heard it immediately. His hands tightened on her arms. What? The pain, not the dagger, not Isolde, inside. The specific, unmistakable, breathtaking pain of something happening that was not supposed to happen for 6 more weeks. The baby, Clara said. The next contraction hit. The word that came out of her mouth was not suitable for any audience. He's coming, she gasped. Right now. Lucian caught her before her knees went. Kane, his voice bypassed sound and became something that moved through walls, through floors, through every person in the estate. Get Bib. West Wing. Now. Clara held onto his jacket and breathed through the fire in her abdomen and thought about all the things she still hadn't said. All the unresolved conversations, all the tangled 8 months in the making truths that were going to have to wait. Because her son had decided that right now was the moment, and he had very clearly inherited his father's complete disregard for appropriate timing. Okay, Clara said, through her teeth. Okay. Lucian lifted her. They moved, and somewhere behind them, on the floor of a room where the fire burned blue, a syringe rolled slowly under the bed, and, 34 weeks in, the impossible child decided the world had waited long enough. The West Wing had been built in 1887. Clara knew this because Lucian had told her once, in the early months of their marriage, during one of those late-night conversations that happened naturally when you lived in a place with too much history and not enough sleep. He'd walked her through the estate room by room. Not as a tour, as an introduction. This is where I have lived. This is what I have built. This is what I'm asking you to be part of. The West Wing had been added during a period of expansion. The previous generation had used it for storage. Lucian had converted it to guest quarters. Now it was a hospital. The floors covered in sterile matting, the walls lined with equipment that had no business existing alongside Gothic architecture. Heart monitors, ventilators, IV stands. An incubator delivered at 2 a.m. by a logistics company that clearly understood the meaning of the word urgent. All of it assembled in under 24 hours. Because Lucian had decided it would be. Clara did not have the bandwidth to process this fully. Not with the 3rd contraction in 8 minutes doing its best to turn her spine inside out. She was on the surgical bed, the one Lucian had specified. She knew this because Dr. Webb had mentioned it with the expression of a man who has received very specific furniture requirements from a vampire king and decided to simply comply. Positioned at a precise angle relative to the heating units, to maintain optimal ambient temperature for a premature infant. Lucian had specified the angle, in writing, in the margin notes. Red category, she would have found this funny under other circumstances. She was finding it almost funny now. The almost was carrying significant weight. Contraction, she said. I know, Dr. Webb said. He'd been there since Kane appeared in the doorway of wherever Webb had been and said 2 words. Webb had moved with the speed of a man who has spent 30 years knowing exactly what those 2 words meant, and what came immediately after, gloved, gowned. His team arranged around him like a practiced organism. Lucian was at the head of the bed, not performing, not managing, just there, his hand in Clara's, her fingers crushing his with a force that would have broken bones on any human being, and was registering on Lucian as something that looked like the greatest privilege he had ever been offered. Talk to me, Dr. Webb said to Clara. I'm here, she said. Pain level, significant. Scale of 1-2. I said significant. He nodded, didn't push. Good doctor, baby's heart rate, he said to his nurse. 192. Elevated but stable. He's strong, Clara said, through her teeth. I know he's strong. You've told me he's strong. He is, Webb said. He's also impatient. He gets that from his father, from the head of the bed, very quietly. That is an unfair characterization, is it? A pause? No, Lucien admitted. Another contraction, deeper. The kind that doesn't ask permission. Clara's head went back. Lucien's hand tightened. I have you, he said. Not loud. Not performed. The kind of statement that exists at the exact frequency of truth. I know, she said. And the thing she hadn't expected. Hadn't built a wall strong enough to stop, she believed him. Dr. Webb worked with the focused efficiency of a man who has faced impossible medical situations before and has learned that the only response to impossible is methodical. He had questions. She could see them. About the biology, about what exactly was happening inside her body as it tried to bring a half-vampire child into the world 6 weeks early. He wasn't asking them. Not now. Now he was delivering a baby. You're doing well, he said to Clara. You're lying, she said. I am not lying. I am emphasizing the positive. Those are the same thing, Clara, just her name, the voice he used when he needed her present. Look at me, she looked. You have done everything right, he said. For 7 months you have done everything right. You ate. You slept. You took the supplements. You came to every appointment. You called me at 2 in the morning when the readings were off, and you never once pretended things were fine when they weren't. He held her gaze. You have gotten this baby 34 weeks into a pregnancy that should have been biologically impossible. What happens next is going to be hard. But you have already done the hardest part. She stared at him. That was a very long sentence for a doctor, she said. I've been waiting to say it for 7 months. He turned back to his work. Now push, she pushed. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Lucien Voss's 3 centuries. He had stood on battlefields, negotiated terms of surrender with men who wanted him dead. He had watched centuries move past like weather. He had never felt this specific, annihilating helplessness before. He could hear everything. That was the thing about supernatural hearing. You couldn't turn it off, every biological sound in the room. Every shift in Clara's vital signs. Every adjustment in the baby's heart rate. The specific terrifying irregularity that moved through the monitor at the 17-minute mark and made Webb's jaw tighten. She didn't notice. She was in the contraction. Eyes closed. Breathing, Lucien noticed. He looked at Webb. Webb looked at him. 1 second. The look of a man communicating a great deal without words. Then he turned back to Clara. 1 more, he said. 1, everything you have left, I don't have. Yes, you do, Webb. Clara. Sharp. Clean. The voice that cuts through pain. 1 more push. Right now. Everything she pushed. The sound she made was not something Lucien would ever be able to describe. Not pain, exactly. Or not only pain. The sound of a body doing the most fundamental thing a body can do. The thing that has been happening since before language. Since before memory, the sound of life insisting on itself. And then silence, 1 beat, 2. And then a cry, not tentative. Not the exploratory sound of a standard premature infant discovering air for the first time. A declaration, furious and full-throated. This is where I am. This is who I am. Pay attention. Webb held him up, and Lucien stopped everything in him. Every calculation, every 3-century-old mechanism of composure and control stopped. The baby was impossibly real. Dark hair, heavy and damp, skin flushed and vital. Arms and legs moving with a force that made Webb's experienced hands adjust their grip, small, premature. 6 weeks early, but not fragile. Nothing about him was fragile. Lucien reached out. Barely touched him. Just fingertips, against the baby's foot. The baby's foot closed around 2 of his fingers with a grip that had no business existing on a body this size. My son, Lucien said. 2 words. In the voice of a man who has just had the entire structure of everything he believed about himself rearranged in the space of a single moment. He looked at Clara. He expected her face. Exhausted. Triumphant. The expression of a woman who has just done something extraordinary and knows it. But Clara wasn't looking at the baby. Her eyes were closed. Her head had fallen to the side. And the monitor beside the bed was making a sound that Lucien had never heard before and recognized immediately for what it was. Webb moved before Lucien fully processed what was happening. The baby was in the nurse's arms. Webb's hands were on Clara's chest. The room reorganized itself around the new emergency with the practiced speed of people who had trained for exactly this. The hemorrhage is too severe, Webb said. Not to anyone specific, to the room. The way surgeons speak when they're working. She's losing too much. Push 2 units of O negative. Now, what is happening? Lucian's voice. Stand back, Webb said. Tell me what, Mr. Voss. Webb did not look up. His hands were moving. Compressions. The physical reality of a man trying to keep a heart beating through sheer mechanical force. Stand back or leave this room. Those are your options. The temperature in the room dropped. Everyone felt it. The nurses, the technician, the guards in the doorway. The specific drop that happened when Lucian Voss moved from human adjacent to what he actually was. Move, Lucian said. Just that one word. I'm trying to save your wife, Webb said. Still not looking up. Still working. Compressions. Steady. Relentless. And I will not move. Silence. The terrible silence of a decision being made. And then Lucian stepped back. 1 step. Only 1, because she had asked him to let the doctor do his work. She had looked at him in the war room and said that the doctor needs to feel like he has a choice. And the implication beneath that, the thing she hadn't said but he had heard clearly. And so do I. He stepped back and watched the monitor. The line was wrong. Wrong in the incontrovertible way that left no room for interpretation. Her heart rate was dropping. Webb worked. His team worked. Room was all sound, equipment, voices, the controlled chaos of medicine at its outer limits. All of it background against the single sound Lucian was focused on, her heartbeat. Growing faint, he had supernatural hearing. He could hear her heartbeat from 50 feet. Had listened to it for 3 years across rooms and floors and the entire length of this estate. He knew the exact rhythm of it, the precise cadence. He had fallen asleep beside it and woken up to it and spent 8 months hearing it as a phantom sound in rooms it wasn't in. It was failing, irregular. Then slower. Then, she's crashing, Webb said. Flat, professional. Blood loss is too severe. Push the epinephrine now. Lucian looked at his son in the nurse's arms, wailing, alive, eyes still closed, fists clenched, furious at the world already. Then he looked at Clara still, too still, the color wrong, the movement of her chest wrong. He had 3 seconds, 3 seconds to make a decision that could not be unmade. He knew it the way you know things that exist below thought, below language, in the oldest part of whatever you are. 1. He looked at Webb, still working, not stopping. 2. He thought about what Clara had said. In the chair, in the room that used to be hers, I needed you, specifically. I came to find you because there was no one else. 3. He bit his own wrist, his fangs, his blood, 3 centuries of it. The most potent blood in the eastern seaboard, not diluted, not transferred through ritual or ceremony, just opened. Available, given. He moved to the head of the bed, Mr. Voss. Webb started. She will die in the next 90 seconds, Lucian said. Quiet, absolutely certain. The certainty of a man who can hear the specific biological reality of what is happening. Your medicine cannot stop this. Not in time. Webb stared at him. What I'm about to do will stop it, Lucian said. You have my word that it will not hurt her, that she will not become what I am, that what it will do is heal the damage and save her life. And the cost, Webb said. Because he was that kind of doctor. Even now, it binds us, Lucian said simply, biologically. For as long as we both live, she will recover faster, age more slowly. She will remain herself in every way that matters. A pause. She will also be tied to me. Does she know this is a possibility? The most important question in the room. No, Lucian said. Webb looked at him. Long, assessing. Then you're making a decision for her, he said. That she can't make herself. Yes. The monitor's sound changed again. Lower, 60 seconds, Lucian said. Webb looked at Clara, at the monitor, at the blood, at the numbers telling a story with a clear and terrible ending. He stepped aside. Lucian knelt beside the bed. He pressed his bleeding wrist against Clara's lips and said, very quietly, the only 2 words true enough for this moment. Forgive me. Nothing happened for 4 seconds, 4 of the longest seconds in Lucian Voss's existence. And then her throat moved, a reflex, old as biology itself, old as breathing. The instinct that exists below consciousness, below choice, in the part of the body that wants to live even when the mind has already gone somewhere else. She swallowed. The effect was not gradual, not gentle. It was a lightning strike. Clara's eyes flew open. Her chest heaved, one massive convulsive breath, and the monitor lurched from its wrong sound to something urgent and alive and climbing. Her color came back in a wave. Like watching a tide return to a shore that had been dry too long. A gold ring appeared in her eyes for 3 seconds, then faded, then was gone. But the change underneath was not gone. Webb stood at the foot of the bed watching the monitors. His face doing something complicated, the face of a scientist confronting data that breaks his existing models and is going to require a complete revision of several previously held certainties. Hemorrhage is stopping, his nurse said. Disbelief barely contained in her professional tone. I can see that, Webb said, the tissue. I can see that too. Clara was breathing. Hard, rhythmic. The breathing of someone returning to their body and finding it changed and not yet knowing exactly how. She blinked. Looked at the ceiling. Lucian, she said. Here, he said, immediately. She turned her head. Something moved through her face. The trying to locate itself expression of someone who has just experienced something that doesn't have a frame yet. Something big enough that the mind keeps finding it's larger than any corner it tries to start from. What did you do, she said. Quietly, not an accusation, a question. I saved your life, he said, Lucian, and I owe you an explanation and an apology, he said, in that order. But first, he looked across the room. The nurse was moving toward them, and in her arms Leo. Clara turned, the expression on her face. Lucian had watched 3 centuries of human faces. He had seen grief and triumph and the terrible beauty of people in moments that broke them open. He had watched love begin and end and the long gray middle where most of it actually lived. He had never seen anything like her face in this moment. Give him to me, she said. The nurse placed Leo in her arms. He was bundled, warm, still furious. Some things were apparently permanent, but the fury had settled into a continuous editorial commentary delivered via furrowed brows and periodic fist activity. Clara pulled him to her chest, pressed her face into his hair, and made a sound, not words. Something before words. Something that lives in the space between breathing and language. Lucian watched. He thought, I am 3 centuries old. I have owned things and built things and held power that most living beings will never approach. I have never had anything like this, not even close, Leo. Clara said into her son's hair. A decision made in real time. A name chosen in the specific quiet of a woman who has just come back from somewhere and found exactly what she needed on this side. She looked up at Lucian. His name is Leo, she said. Lucian looked at his son, at the dark hair, at the eyes, barely open but already tracking toward Clara's face, with the focused attention of something that knew exactly where it was supposed to be. Leo, he said. The baby, for one moment, stopped frowning. Just one moment. Then resumed frowning, but still. 3 weeks later, it was snowing. Clara stood at the window of the master suite and watched it come down. Fat flakes. The kind that's fast and made everything quiet. Boston winters. She'd forgotten how quiet they could be. She felt different. She'd known since she woke up the morning after Leo's birth and realized she could hear the generators in the basement. All 3 of them. The hum of each one distinct, separately audible. From 4 floors up and half an estate away, she could hear Leo, always. From anywhere in the building. The specific sound of his breathing when he slept. The particular quality of his cry when he was hungry versus when he was simply expressing opinions about existence. She could hear Lucian moving through the corridors. The specific cadence of his footsteps. The difference between his thinking walk and his working walk. She wasn't a vampire. Webb had been very clear about that. Clear in the way of a man who had spent 3 weeks taking blood samples every 12 hours and building a new medical framework from scratch, and was both professionally fascinated and genuinely alarmed by every finding. Not a vampire. But not entirely what she'd been before, either. Something new. Something that required a new framework. She'd decided she was fine with that. The door opened. Lucian came in with Leo. He'd been doing the 4 a.m. shift, her insistence, his genuine and slightly surprised willingness, and Leo had apparently decided that 6 a.m. was a reasonable time to be awake and vocal about his opinions. He was also in Lucian's arms, currently attempting to grab the collar of Lucian's shirt with a grip strength Webb had documented with the expression of a man adding an urgent note to a rapidly expanding file. He's been doing this for 20 minutes, Lucian said. He likes fabric, Clara said. He's been doing it to me for 2 weeks. He pulled 3 buttons off yesterday, I know. I heard it happen. Lucian gave her the particular look he'd been giving her since her hearing changed. Not alarmed. Something more complicated than alarmed. She was still working out what it was. She took Leo. He settled immediately. The transition from Lucian's arms to hers was seamless. He simply relocated, adjusted, and resumed his shirt-grabbing enterprise using her cardigan as the new target. Kane had news from the High Council, Lucian said. I know. I heard the call. A pause. From here? From here, he absorbed this. Lord Aldrich is coming. In 2 days. He, is demanding a formal audience to assess Leo's legitimacy and my suitability as queen. Clara looked down at Leo. I heard that part too, Clara. It's fine. It's not fine. They have no right to. Lucian, she looked up. It's fine. I'll handle it. He studied her face. Something moving in his expression. The specific thing that had been moving through it for 3 weeks. The thing she still hadn't quite found the name for. You don't need to handle it, he said. I am the king of this court. Aldrich answers to me. I can. I know what you can do, she said. So I'm saying I want to do this one. Silence. Leo grabbed a button. All right, Lucian said, simply. No argument. She looked at him. 3 centuries of absolute authority, and he just said, all right, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're getting better at that, she said. At what? Stepping back, a long pause. I'm working on it, he said. Lord Aldrich arrived on a Tuesday. He brought 20 guards. Elite. The kind of vampire court security that existed to demonstrate that you could afford it. They filled the entrance hall with their tactical gear and carefully calibrated menace, and their collective sense of being the most dangerous thing in any given room. They were not the most dangerous thing in this room. Clara came down the stairs at 10 a.m. She'd thought about what to wear for approximately 3 minutes before going to the wardrobe and pulling out the Alexander McQueen. The crimson one. The one she'd bought in London 2 years ago, before everything, and had never found the right occasion for. She'd found the occasion. It fit differently now. 3 weeks postpartum, her body still in the ongoing conversation with itself that follows childbirth. But she'd stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Really looked, and found that she had no complaints. Not one. She'd been built for endurance. She knew that now in ways she hadn't known before. The body she'd spent 34 weeks asking more of than should have been biologically feasible. This body had delivered. In every sense of the word, she walked down the stairs. Lucian was at the bottom. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked into the hall together. Aldrich was at the far end. Tall, gaunt, bone-white hair. The eyes of a man who has spent enough centuries certain of his own superiority that he's forgotten there's any other way to see the world. He looked at Clara. The way men like Aldrich look at women like Clara. The comprehensive, dismissive assessment that takes in the whole picture and renders a verdict before a word is spoken. King Lucian, a shallow, mocking bow. We received your missive regarding the lieutenant's execution. A considerable loss. Was a traitor, Lucian said. Flat, she was one of our heir for over a century. Whatever the circumstances, she poisoned me and framed my wife and spent 3 years attempting to destroy my marriage and my bloodline, each word its own wall. Whatever grief the council feels for her is their business. What happens in this court is mine. Aldrich's eyes moved to Clara, and this, he said. This is what has been declared queen, not who. What? Her name, Lucian said, and something moved into his voice, is Clara. Aldrich stepped forward, ignoring Lucian entirely, focusing on Clara. The move of a man who has decided the fastest route through a situation is directly at what he perceives as its weakest point. A human, he said. Mortal. Soft, his gaze moved down, then up. Clinical. Designed to diminish. You take up considerably more space than our previous queens, and you have produced a half-breed child and expect this council to recognize him as the Voss heir. Lucian moved. Clara put her hand on his chest, just her hand. Open palm. Against the lapel of his jacket, he stopped. She stepped forward, away from him, into the space between Lucian and Aldrich, 1 step. Then another. Aldrich watched her come. Something in his expression. The particular attention of a predator watching something that has made the mistake of moving toward it. Lord Aldrich, Clara said, her voice. Not loud, not theatrical, just her voice. But there was something under it now. Something that hadn't been there 8 months ago. Something that had been introduced the night of Leo's birth and had been building for 3 weeks, like a tide reaching its moment. I take up space, she said, because I am full of something your council has been empty of for centuries. She was 6 feet away from him. 5. You want to know if Leo is legitimate. 4 feet. You want to know if I am suitable. 3. You want to test what you think is the weak point of this court. She stopped directly in front of him. Aldrich was 6'2". Clara, in heels, was 5'7". She looked up at him without tilting her head. The specific kind of looking up that is not actually looking up. Kneel, she said. 1 word, not shouted, not commanded with theatrical weight, just placed into the air the way you place a key into a lock. And the lock opened. Aldrich's knees hit the marble before he understood what was happening. The sound was significant. Behind him, all 20 elite guards dropped simultaneously, like a tide going out, all at once. 20 centuries old vampire soldiers on their knees, on the floor of the Voss estate, compelled by something none of them had ever encountered, the blood of a vampire king. Running through a human heart, the sovereign authority of the Voss bloodline, channeled through the woman who carried it. Something that had never existed before. Aldrich's hands were on the floor, his bone-white hair fallen forward, breathing hard. The specific breathing of something ancient being forced to recognize something it has no framework for. He looked up at Clara. She looked down at him. "I survived a poison plot built by someone who had a century to construct it," she said. "I spent 8 months pregnant and alone making decisions that kept my son alive. I walked into this estate to sign a divorce and chose to stay instead. I gave birth on a table in a renovated storage wing and came back from further than you would like to believe." She held his gaze without flinching. "Your counsel did not make me. Your recognition does not define me. And your assessment of my suitability is not a question I am entertaining." She took that one step back. "Return to your council," she said. "Tell them that the Voss court is led by a king and a queen who share one life. Tell them that Leo Voss is the heir to this bloodline, and tell them," a pause, "that if they send armed representatives into my home again to assess my family, I will not limit myself to making them kneel silence." Then she turned her back on them, all 21, completely, without a backward glance. The specific dismissal of someone who has nothing left to prove to the people behind her. She walked back to Lucian. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face in 3 years. Not composure, not the controlled expression of a man managing his reactions, Sybil. A man looking at something that has just become the most remarkable thing he has ever seen. Knowing it, and not trying to hide it. She took his arm. "Release them," she said. Quietly, the invisible weight lifted. She heard them scramble to their feet behind her. The sound of certainty being hastily reassembled. The particular noise of men who need very badly to be somewhere else. The doors were already open. They left. Quickly, the doors closed. The hall went quiet. They walked up the stairs together, the same stairs she'd climbed alone on the night she arrived. One hand on the railing, one hand on her stomach, every step a severing of something. Different now. Everything different. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. "Yes, the bond," she said. "What you did. The night of Leo's birth, he was quiet. You made a decision for me," she said, without asking, without being able to ask. "I understand why. I know you were out of time." She felt his arm shift slightly under her hand. "I'm not angry about it, you're not, I'm not." A pause. "I want you to understand that I know what it cost you to make it. To step into that and take on the consequence of it." She looked at him. "You could have just given me the blood." The bond didn't have to be part of it. He stopped walking. She stopped with him. They were on the landing. The window beside them showing Boston in snow, white and gray and the specific muffled quiet of a city under weather. "The bond is what makes it permanent," he said. "Without it, the blood heals the immediate damage, but your body remains what it was. Vulnerable to the same things. The next time there's a crisis, I know," she said. "I know that's why. But tell me the real reason." A long silence. "Because I could not do it halfway," he said finally. "Because giving you something that saved your life for that night and left you unprotected for every night after was not something I was capable of doing." He held her gaze. "Because I have spent 3 centuries in this world understanding that the only things worth doing are worth doing completely." "Or not at all," she looked at him. "That," she said, "is the most Lucian Voss sentence you have ever said." Something shifted in his expression, "Is it? Completely or not at all?" She repeated it. "Yes, that is extremely you. Is that a criticism?" She considered it. "No," she said. "It's just accurate. A moment. The snow outside. The sound of Leo, 3 floors up, definitively awake and sharing his opinions about it. The distant sound of Mara's voice on the phone, punctuated by the cadence of someone winning an argument. Mara had renegotiated her room assignment twice in 3 weeks. It was a considerably better room now. Lucian had agreed to both requests with the expression of a man who has decided that Clara's lawyer is an asset worth keeping comfortable. Mara had responded by filing 3 separate supernatural legal briefs that would, she explained to Clara, over coffee, establish a framework that would prevent this kind of creative interpretation of the word guest for at least the next century. Clara had told her that sounded about right. "I'm not signing the divorce papers," Clara said. Lucian went very still. "I know they're ruined," she said. "I know technically I can have Mara file new ones. I know what's legally mine under the dissolution agreement. She stopped. I'm not filing new ones, Clara. I'm not done being angry with you, she said clearly. I want to be absolutely clear about that. There are things you did wrong that we have not fully addressed. The corporate culture. The way certain people were allowed to treat me for 3 years. The specific, recurring way you prioritized political management over direct communication. She held his gaze. Those conversations are going to happen. All of them. Yes, he said, and you're going to listen. Yes, and not manage me while I'm listening. A pause. I will endeavor, he said carefully, to listen without strategizing. Better, she said. We'll work on the rest. She started up the stairs. He walked beside her. So, he said. After a moment. So, she said, you're staying, I'm staying. The words landed differently than she expected. Not like a decision. Like a recognition of something that had already been true for longer than she'd admitted. Something that had been true in the doorway of his study 8 months ago. Maybe. When she'd turned around and walked away and carried something she hadn't said to the one person it belonged to. Maybe she'd been staying all along. The door to Leo's room was open. The nurse was there. The one from Webb's team who had, over 3 weeks, gone from visibly terrified of the estate to somewhat grudgingly charmed by it, and had accepted an extended contract with the expression of someone making a rational, professional decision that might also be something slightly more than professional. Leo was awake, eyes open. That extraordinary gaze of his, dark and intent and focused on the doorway with the concentrated attention of someone who has been waiting. He saw Clara, his whole face changed, not a smile. Too early for smiles, Webb had said, but something. The something that happens in a baby's face when the person they have oriented their entire new existence around appears in their field of vision. Clara went to him, picked him up, settled him against her shoulder. He made a sound that was not crying and not laughing and was somehow better than both. Lucien stood in the doorway, looking at them. Just looking, 3 centuries, he said, quietly. Not to her, to something larger than the room. I held this court together through wars and politics and everything the world has thrown at it. A pause. And nothing I have done in all that time comes close to what happened in the last 3 weeks. Clara looked over Leo's head at him. Close, she said. He looked at her. You're close, she said. Keep working. Something moved through his expression. Not the composed thing he showed the world. The real thing. The thing underneath. The thing that looked, she realized, very much like the beginning of something she didn't have a word for yet. But she had time to find it. They had, as it turned out, a considerable amount of time. Leo grabbed her cardigan with both fists and held on. Outside, Boston was white and quiet, and entirely unaware that something unprecedented had taken up residence in a Gothic estate on its outskirts. A woman who was not quite what she'd been, a king who was not quite what he'd been, and between them, a small, furious person who had inherited the best and worst of both. The snow kept falling. The estate settled into its old bones. And somewhere in the East Wing, Mara Aldgate finally won her argument, set down her phone, looked out her window at the snow, and thought about the very unusual life that had assembled itself around her in the last 3 weeks. She decided, provisionally, that she had seen worse places to be. She was right. They all had.